Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of our program. This is Mike Saunders with Marketing Huddle. Today we are privileged to have with us David Meerman Scott, who is a sales strategist, a marketing guru, and the author of the New Rules of Marketing and PR. Welcome to the program, David.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Awesome to be here.
Super. Well, hey, let's just jump right into a real specific question. Recently, I saw Gary Vaynerchuk at the Denver Digital Marketing Summit and picked up some great sound bites, of course, as you can imagine. He mentioned that people need to be a media company, comma, and then whatever your company name is, and you need to be the marketing strategist that looks forward where the industry's headed rather than settling for all the places and ways that you've been in the past. So my question initially is, how would you recommend achieving that using the new rules of marketing and PR based on your book?
Well, first of all, I've been doing this work for a hell of a lot longer than Gary V has, and basically invented the idea of real-time communications and marketing using content going back almost 15 years. The basic thing here is that buyers are now in charge. Buyers go to the web. They go to search engines. They go to social networks. They can gather near perfect information about what your company is doing and what your products and services are about and whether you're responsive or not. And that means that the whole order of the buyer-seller relationship has completely changed. And what I've noticed in my travels around the world, I've presented in 42 different countries now, all 7 continents, is that most organizations are out of alignment between the ways that people are buying and the ways that they're marketing and selling. Now, yes, as Gary says, there is a component about being in front of trends, but I think you can go too far with that. So I disagree with that to a certain degree. Everybody's talking, for example, right now as we're recording this, Snapchat is a popular channel. And I get that. Snapchat is interesting. It's got lots of users. But depending on your marketplace, if you were to jump onto Snapchat and focus your marketing attention and your sales attention to Snapchat, depending on the industry you're in, depending on the market you're in, that might not be such a great idea. Because
what if you sell B2B to government agencies?
Right. You're selling B2B in government agencies and you're pouring your efforts into the new thing that Gary says. I don't think you're going to be that successful. So I think it's much, much more important to be thinking about who are what I call your buyer personas. Who are the people you're trying to reach? How much information can you gather about those people collectively by interviewing them, by understanding the words and phrases they use, by going to the events and the conferences that they go to, and just totally immersing yourself in your buyers. And that is critically important, and that's what you can do to truly make your marketing and sales come alive by understanding buyers. And the second component, which I think is utterly essential, is this idea of real-time communications, the idea of engaging when the time is right. In other words, twisting the way that most people do marketing and sales, which is on their time. They plan a campaign. They plan, there's an email marketing campaign for next week, and they're going to do a sales push for next month, that kind of thing. Twisting that to be marketing when the market is ready or when a particular buyer is ready, rather than on your time, you're doing it on their time.
Yeah, excellent point, of course, and it's almost like the feeling of checking off a box, okay, I did this week and this week, so you can turn it into the boss. So with that thought in mind, another really important trend that we're seeing today is the customer journey through the sales process and people that need to own that. How would you combine your real-time marketing and another concept that you're known for is newsjacking to take some of that real-time relevant news and integrate that in with the customer journey?
Good question. So what's interesting to me, I've been doing sales and marketing now for 25 years. Right out of school, I started on a bond trading desk, and I totally understood real-time communications as a result of that. And I lasted for about a year and a half. I was a terrible bond trader, but I did understand the idea of real-time communications. And ever since then, I've been doing sales and marketing for a number of different organizations, and for the last 12 years or so on my own. And what I used to do back in the day when I was actually a bag-carrying salesperson and when I was a marketing vice president for a couple of different companies was that there was a really big demarcation between what marketing did and what sales did. And I remember back in the day that whether I was a marketer or a salesperson that time is irrelevant because it worked the same way. The marketing people were in charge of generating leads. Once they got those leads, they handed it off to the salespeople, and there really wasn't any interaction between marketing and salespeople once they've made that handoff. So in other words, marketing didn't communicate as salespeople were trying to close a deal. So I think that's completely and utterly changed from the perspective that content, whether that's video or blogs or ebooks or infographics, images, whatever it is, whatever sorts of content makes sense for your business, that content drives both marketing and sales. And that's a really big change because now on the web, if somebody is looking for content and they don't know who you are, they might go to the search engines or they might ask their friends on social networks, and they'll find a piece of content. If you're doing a good job, they'll find a piece of content you created. Then, at some point, they might express interest. Maybe they'll fill out a form. Maybe they'll join a webinar. Maybe they'll tweet to you, or maybe they'll join your LinkedIn group, whatever it is. Once somebody expresses interest, then a salesperson can curate content going forward based on that individual person's needs. But it's still content that drives both. So therefore, both marketing and sales have a very important role in driving people all the way through the buying journey to the close. And you mentioned newsjacking, which I absolutely love. It's a fantastic concept. It's basically how can you tie your brand, your ideas, even your products and services, to what's happening in the news. And so what's going on right now that you could potentially create some piece of content around and generate interest both with the media and potentially even with existing or potential customers. And that becomes a really interesting part of the journey because, and it goes back to what I said earlier, you're reaching people when the moment is right, not when you're ready, but when the moment's right. I'll just give you a real quick example. I'm a big fan of the fantastic case study that we're all witnessing right now, which is the U.S. presidential election. It's absolutely fascinating. I love it. And there's all sorts of examples of organizations that have newsjacked the presidential election, but here's one that I saw that I quite liked. Donald Trump a couple of times accused Hillary Clinton of playing the women's card. And then Hillary Clinton fired back and said, I'm not playing the women's card. I'm focused on issues, including women's issues. And that's a very typical kind of political back and forth. And I'm not commenting at all on the political aspect of it. It doesn't matter who I support nor who is supported, who you support or anyone else supports. And if you live outside the United States, it doesn't really matter what matter of our election. But what I found fascinating is this guy on Kickstarter actually published a deck of cards, and he marketed it on Kickstarter at the moment that this brouhaha around whether I'm playing the women's card or not was surfaced a couple of weeks ago, I think it was. And in his 30-day Kickstarter campaign, he generated right around $150,000 of orders. So imagine that. Imagine you're an entrepreneur. You're following what's going on in the news. You see something that sparks something in your mind, a pattern recognition, and say, well, shoot, the candidates are all talking about this women's card thing. Why don't I create some women's cards? And he pushed that out. And then the media picks up on it, because when the media is writing a story about something like, for example, this back and forth around women's issues between the two candidates, and then the media is talking about that, they're always looking for a new angle on the story, and then they ended up quoting, talking about this guy's Kickstarter campaign, which drove even more people into the Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, I think I read one of your articles talking about a trip that President Obama was going to take to a part of the country where there was alligators, and I forget whether it was Australia or not, but then some insurance company came out with a push talking about the trip and how they were going to give, I don't know, alligator insurance to President Obama or something to that effect.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was he went to Australia, and there was crocodile insurance, but TIO Insurance is the name of the company. They realized President Obama was going to be visiting Australia, and at the moment that he set foot on Australian soil, getting off of Air Force One, at that moment, they issued both a media alert and a blog post saying that they've granted President Obama free crocodile attack insurance. So if he were to get eaten and killed by a crocodile, Michelle Obama would get $50,000. And it was kind of silly, but at the same time, they ended up getting quoted. They ended up talking about this in something like 4,000 mainstream media stories. So essentially, the media knew that Obama was going to Australia, and everyone knows that. So, oh my God, imagine you're a reporter. God, that's all right. So we know Obama's coming. How can we figure out something else to say about this? And then all of a sudden, this TIO insurance company pops up with this crazy offer of free crocodile attack insurance. Bingo! Those reporters have something else to
And look, we're still talking about it now. So it really has a little bit of that kind of trailing life. And you mentioned something interesting as well, and we'll wrap up with this question, talking about people finding you. And, I recently interviewed Eric Qualman, who talks about your digital footprint. So when people come and look for things, they want, or you want them to find things about you. So in one sense, that's almost flipping the newsjacking concept, where you could orchestrate something about your company to get in the news, like this insurance company. Now, if that's all they did, they would get a pop. But I would say that when you can marry the sales and marketing and take that piece of news and a few of those little digital footprints and use that in your sales process to say, hey, we're so honored to have been mentioned in. And when you're getting ready to do a presentation to a large prospective client or putting in an RFP, to use that in the content, because now you're not just saying it, other people are saying it about you.
That's exactly right. And my friend Eric is absolutely right about that. I mean, think about it. And we all do this. You do this, Mike. I do this. When you're researching a company to potentially do business, or a product or service you might want to buy, especially if it's a big ticket item, at some point you might go to a review site, or you might go to the company's website, or you might check out and see if they have a social network feed, like a Twitter feed or a LinkedIn feed or whatever it might be. And what you're looking for is, what are these people publishing? What are other people saying about them? And of course, people also go to Google and other search engines and do a search on a company name or an individual person's name. And whatever pops up is who you are. On the web, you are what you publish. So if you're publishing great content, you're great. If you're publishing bad content, you're bad. If you're publishing nothing, you're nothing. And I truly believe that. And interestingly, my name is David Meerman Scott. Meerman is my middle name. When I first jumped onto the web way back in, I actually had an email address even before this, but my first website I put up around 1998, I realized that there were, my gosh, it's almost 20 years. I've had a website for almost 20 years. But I realized at that point that there were a lot of other David Scotts out there on the web. There's a David Scott who walked on the moon as the commander of Apollo 15. There's a David Scott who's a member of Congress from the state of Georgia. There's a David Scott who's an Ironman triathlon champion. So there's all these other David Scotts out there. And at the time, if I Googled David Scott, I didn't get anything at all about me, but I got tons of things about these other people. So I actually started using my middle name, Meerman, in my professional endeavors at that point. and that was still while I was working at companies before I started my business in 2002. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made, because if you Google my full name, David Meerman Scott, or you go to Amazon, you type in David Meerman Scott, or any social network, David Meerman Scott, you get only me. And I think a lot of people make a mistake in that if they're creating a company name or a product name, or even when they start their own social networking, they're so much like other people that it's hard to break through and you can't find who they are. Now, I'm not suggesting that it's the right move for everybody to start using their middle name or do something else like I did, but I got to say, it's a pretty helpful thing for me. It's been probably the most significant business decision I've ever made, with the possible exception of writing my first nonfiction book. So, really critical stuff. And yes, you are what you publish, but if nobody can find you, then what good is it?
Or if you get lost in the flurry of sameness, then it doesn't matter what you've published, because someone could see what you published and associate it with something or someone else. So we of course, could talk for about 14 and a half more hours. So let's wrap it up by just saying thank you. Appreciate the work you do. And I have your third edition of New Rules of Marketing PR in paperback. And then I recently bought the fifth edition, making it through to see the updated case studies. So Thank you for your work, and thank you for your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot, Mike, for having me on.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.